The sound of shattering metal and rolling coins cut through the humid Atlanta air like a gunshot. A jar of nickels and dimes grocery money, rent money, survival money hit the oil-stained concrete and exploded outward. Etta Mae Robinson stood frozen, her trembling hands hovering over her chest, watching her dignity scatter across the pavement under the unforgiving noon sun. "Are you deaf or just stupid? I said move this piece of junk." The scream came from a young man in a neon yellow sports car that cost more than Etta Mae had earned in 72 years of life. Trent Van Der Hoven stepped out of the vehicle, his designer sneakers crunching on the loose change. He towered over her, his face twisted in a sneer of pure entitlement. He checked his gold watch, then glared back at her rusted 1998 sedan blocking the pump. I'm sorry, son," Etta Mae whispered, her voice cracking. "The machine, it wouldn't take the bills. I just needed enough to get my grandson to." "I don't care about your grandson," Trent shouted, kicking a handful of nickels under her car. "I have places to be. People like you are always holding up the rest of us. If you can't afford gas, take the bus. Get this trash out of my way before I have it towed myself. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe, and really I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel." Heat radiated off the asphalt, burning through the thin soles of Etta Mae's shoes, but the cold shame in her chest was worse. A crowd had gathered. Phones were out. The red recording lights blinked like judgmental eyes. No one moved to help. No one spoke up. They just watched the old woman shrink, her gray hair tucked neatly under a Sunday hat that was now slightly askew. She bent down, her arthritic knees popping, reaching for a dime near Trent's shoe. Trent laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Yeah, that's right. Scrape it up. Maybe you can buy a clue with it." He raised his hand, gesturing aggressively as if to shoot a stray dog. Etta Mae flinched. The air grew thick, suffocating. Trent opened his mouth to launch another insult, to twist the knife deeper into the wound of her poverty. Then, the sunlight vanished. 3 massive, matte black SUVs pulled into the station in perfect formation, blocking the exit and casting a long, dark shadow over the yellow sports car. The engines didn't rattle, they purred with a deep, predatory rumble that vibrated in the chest. The doors of the lead vehicle flew open. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, moving with the synchronized precision of soldiers. But it was the man who emerged from the middle vehicle who stopped time. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like armor. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at the pumps. His eyes, dark and unreadable, locked onto Trent. The young heir's mouth hung open, his insult dying in his throat. The stranger took 1 step forward, and the temperature at the gas station seemed to drop 20 degrees. Damon Ghost St. James did not run. He did not shout. He moved across the pavement with a fluid, terrifying grace that made the air part around him. His security detail fanned out, their hands clasped loosely in front of them, eyes scanning the perimeter for threats. But the only threat here was the man walking toward the pumps. Trent swallowed hard, his earlier bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. He recognized the man. Everyone in the city who mattered and everyone who feared for their lives knew the ghost. Damon St. James wasn't just money, he was the kind of power that didn't need to raise its voice. "Mr. St. James," Trent stammered, a nervous smile twitching on his lips. He took a step back, nearly tripping over the fuel hose. I didn't know you were in the neighborhood. I was just dealing with this situation. This woman, she's blocking." Damon stopped 2 feet from him. He didn't blink. He didn't look at the car. He looked down at the scattered coins shining in the grease spots on the ground. Then he looked at Etta Mae. He saw the tears she was fighting to hold back. He saw the trembling in her hands hands that looked exactly like the ones that used to braid his hair 30 years ago. "You dropped something," Damon said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but heavy, like velvet wrapped around a brick. Trent let out a breathless, confused laugh. "What? No, she dropped it. I was just telling her too. I wasn't talking to her," Damon interrupted. He finally turned his gaze to Trent. The look was devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. It was the look a butcher gives a piece of meat before the cleaver falls. "You dropped your manners, and you dropped this woman's money." The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. The crowd had stopped recording. Even the traffic on the nearby street seemed to hush. Damon took a step closer, invading Trent's personal space. "Pick it up." Trent blinked, his face flushing a deep, splotchy red. "Excuse me? The money?" Damon said, pointing to a quarter resting near the tire of the yellow sports car. "Every single cent. You kicked it. You pick it up." Trent bristled, his ego warring with his survival instinct. "Look, my dad is Van Der Hoven. You can't just tell me to." One of Damon's guards took a single, heavy step forward. The sound of his shoe hitting the pavement was like a gavel striking a sounding block. Damon didn't move. He just waited. "Knees," Damon whispered. Gravity seemed to increase around Trent. Under the crushing weight of Damon's stare and the silent threat of the men surrounding him, the young heir crumbled. His knees hit the dirty, hot concrete. The expensive denim of his jeans soaked up the oil stains immediately. "Pick them up," Damon commanded softly. With shaking hands, Trent reached for the coins. He crawled on the ground, the neon prince reduced to a scavenger. He grabbed nickels, dimes, and pennies, placing them into a pile. The crowd watched in stunned silence. There were no cheers, just the heavy, solemn witnessing of justice. Damon turned his back on Trent, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a stain on the floor. He walked over to Etta Mae, his demeanor shifting instantly. The cold killer vanished, replaced by a man who looked at her with profound respect. "I apologize for the disturbance, ma'am," Damon said. He pulled a crisp, white handkerchief from his pocket and gently took the dirty coins from her hand, replacing them with the cloth. No queen should have to bow to a fool. Etta Mae looked up at him, her eyes wide. I just needed to get to the university. My grandson, Malik, he has an interview." Damon nodded to one of his men. The guard immediately swiped a card at the pump and began filling Etta Mae's tank. Damon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a matte black business card with a single gold number embossed on it. "Your tank is full," Damon said, pressing the card into her palm. "And your grandson will make that interview. But take this, if anyone at all bothers you again, you call that number." Etta Mae looked at the card, then back at the man who had just brought a tyrant to his knees. "Who are you, son?" "Just someone who remembers where he came from," Damon replied. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "And tell Malik that the scholarship he's applying for, I sit on that board. We need to talk about his future." Etta Mae's breath hitched. How could he possibly know who Malik was? 2 days later, the world Etta Mae stepped into was a universe away from her small, 2-bedroom walk-up. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, revealing a space that smelled of expensive leather, sandalwood, and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Atlanta that Etta Mae had only ever seen on postcards. "Right this way, Ms. Robinson," the security guard said. His name was Marcus, a giant of a man who had treated her with the tenderness of a grandson since picking her up that morning. She walked across the marble floors, her sensible church shoes clicking softly. The room was cold, beautiful, and empty. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. On a massive mahogany dining table, a silver tray held a tea service. Next to the delicate china sat a heavy black leather Bible, and next to the Bible lay a semi-automatic pistol. Etta Mae paused, staring at the weapon. It wasn't hidden. It was sitting there as casually as a remote control. "I see you found the decor." A voice came from the spiral staircase. Damon descended, wearing a casual sweater that probably cost more than her car. He looked younger here, less armored, but the dangerous edge was still there, humming beneath the surface. "Tea?" he offered, walking past the gun without acknowledging it. "I prefer coffee," Etta Mae said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She pointed a finger at the table. "And I prefer my scripture without the side of violence." Damon stopped pouring the water. He looked at the gun, then at the Bible, then at her. A small, dry smile touched his lips. "In my line of work, Ms. Robinson, you need both. One for the soul, one to keep the soul in the body." "You're a dangerous man, Damon St. James," she said, refusing to sit. "I looked you up. They call you a lot of names." "I've been called worse," he admitted, pulling out a chair for her. "But I'm not a liar. I told you that day at the pump I'm not a good man. But I will protect my own." Over the next hour, the tension in the room began to unravel, thread by thread. Etta Mae didn't cower. She didn't fawn over his wealth. She lectured him about the dust on his high shelves, and asked Marcus if he was eating enough vegetables. For the first time in years, the penthouse felt like a home. Damon watched her, a strange ache in his chest. She reminded him so much of the woman who had raised him, the woman he had failed to save from the streets that now bowed to him. "Malik has a good head on his shoulders," Etta Mae said, sipping the tea she had eventually accepted. "He wants to be an architect. I want to build things, not tear them down." "He's got the grades," Damon said, looking at a file on the counter. "And now he has the funding. I made sure the committee saw his portfolio. He's in ETA." Etta Mae set her cup down, her eyes tearing up. "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know why you're doing this." "Because you stood your ground," Damon said quietly. "Most people fold. You didn't." They were interrupted by a shattering crash. Glass exploded across the living room floor as a brick sailed through the panoramic window, landing with a heavy thud on the Persian rug. Marcus was in front of Etta Mae instantly, shielding her body with his own. Damon didn't flinch. He walked calmly to the brick, the glass crunching under his boots. There was a note tied to it with a rubber band. Damon pulled it free and unfolded the paper. His face, which had been warm moments ago, turned into a mask of ice. "What is it?" Etta Mae asked, her voice trembling from behind Marcus's massive back. Damon crushed the note in his fist. The veins in his forearm bulged. "It's a message," he said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper again. "From Trent's father. He knows you're here." Blue and red lights strobed against the dark pavement of the isolated back road, blinding Malik Robinson as he shielded his eyes. He hadn't been speeding. He hadn't run a stop sign. But the unmarked sedan had swerved in front of his beat-up Corolla, forcing him onto the gravel shoulder. "Get out of the vehicle, now." The command didn't come from a friendly neighborhood officer. It came from a man in plain clothes with a tactical vest, his hand already resting on his holster. Malik's heart hammered against his ribs. He raised his hands, trembling. I didn't do anything, officer. I'm just heading home from the library." "I said get out." The officer yanked the door open and grabbed Malik by the collar of his hoodie, dragging him onto the dirt. Dust filled Malik's nose as he was shoved against the hood of the car. The metal was hot against his cheek. "Check him," the second officer said, his voice bored, methodical. "We got a tip about a vehicle matching this description moving drugs. Drug? Malik gasped, the gravel digging into his knees. I don't have drugs. I have textbooks. I'm a student. Shut up. The first officer hissed, tightening the handcuffs until they bit into Malik's wrists. He leaned close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and tobacco. You're whatever Mr. Van Der Hoven says you are. The name hit Malik like a physical blow. This wasn't a traffic stop. It was a message. Inside the car, Malik's phone buzzed on the passenger seat. The screen lit up. Grandma. The second officer reached in, grabbed the phone, and looked at the screen. He smirked, swiped the call to answer, and held it to Malik's ear, but kept it just out of reach of his face. Say goodbye, kid, the officer whispered. Grandma! Malik screamed, panic shredding his voice. Grandma, they have me! It's Van Der Hoven. They're Hoven. The call ended with a click. The screen went black. The phone slipped from Etta Mae's hand and hit the Persian rug with a dull thud. The color drained from her face, leaving her ashen. Damon didn't ask what happened. He saw the terror in the eyes of a woman who had faced down Jim Crow laws without flinching. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his movements sharp and precise. Malik? Damon asked. They have him, Etta Mae whispered, her voice barely audible. The police? But not the police. He said Van Der Hoven. He screamed, Damon. My baby screamed. The air in the penthouse shifted instantly. The warmth was gone. The casual atmosphere evaporated. Damon St. James stood straighter, his jaw set in a line of granite. He looked at Marcus. Track the phone, Damon ordered. The command was soft, but it carried enough force to shatter bone. Already on it, boss, Marcus said, typing furiously on a tablet. Signal cut out on Old River Road, 2 miles past the abandoned textile plant. That's Van Der Hoven territory. Damon walked to the wall panel behind the wet bar and pressed his palm against a scanner. The wood panel slid back, revealing a row of monitors and a rack of tactical gear. This was the war room. This was where the businessman died and the ghost was born. He grabbed a heavy Kevlar vest and strapped it on over his cashmere sweater. He checked the magazine of a matte black pistol and slid it into a holster. You can't go alone, Etta Mae said, her shock turning into a desperate, fierce protectiveness. She stood up, her legs shaking but holding. That man owns the police. He owns the judges. Damon turned to her. His eyes were dark voids. He rented them, Etta. He doesn't own them. And he just broke the only rule that matters in this city. What rule? She asked. He touched the innocent to get to the dangerous, Damon said, grabbing a set of keys. He wants a reaction? He's going to get into a war. I'm coming, Etta Mae stated. It wasn't a request. Damon looked at her, about to refuse, but he saw the steel in her spine. She wasn't just a grandmother anymore, she was a matriarch, defending her blood. Stay in the car, Damon said, and keep your head down. The textile plant was a skeleton of rusted steel and broken glass, looming against the night sky like a jagged tooth. 3 floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a black van parked in the center of the loading dock. Damon's SUV sat in the shadows 300 yards away, engine off. Inside, the silence was heavy. Etta Mae sat in the back, her hands clasped in prayer, her eyes glued to the factory. They're inside, Marcus said from the driver's seat, listening to the earpiece. Heat signatures confirm 6 hostiles, 1 hostage. They're waiting for you to show up so they can ambush. Let's not keep them waiting, Damon said. He opened the door and stepped into the night. He didn't sneak. He didn't hide. He walked straight down the center of the broken asphalt driveway, his hands empty and held out to his sides. From the loading dock, a voice boomed over a megaphone. It was Trent's father, Leland Van Der Hoven. Mr. St. James. Leland shouted, stepping into the light. He was an older, heavier version of his son, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the industrial rot. So nice of you to join us. I believe you have something of mine, my son's dignity, and I have something of yours. Two men in tactical gear dragged Malik forward. He was battered, a bruise forming on his cheek, but alive. A gun was pressed to his temple. Let him go, Leland, Damon said, his voice carrying clearly through the night air. This ends now. You walk away, you keep your life. You stay, and you lose everything. Leland laughed, a wet, ugly sound. You think you're scary, Damon? You're just a thug in a suit. I own this town. I have the chief of police on speed dial. Now, get on your knees, just like you made my boy do. Damon stopped walking. He looked at Malik. He looked at the men holding him. I gave you a chance, Damon said. He dropped his hand. From the darkness surrounding the factory, 3 red laser dots appeared simultaneously on the chests of the men holding Malik. Before Leland could take another breath, the glass of the factory windows shattered inward. Chapter 9. The sound of suppressed rifle fire was like a series of harsh coughs. Twip, twip, twip. The 3 men guarding Malik dropped before they heard the shots. Malik scrambled backward, falling to the ground, covering his head. Leland froze, the megaphone slipping from his hand and clattering onto the concrete. He looked around wildly as dark shapes materialized from the shadows. Damon's security team, moving with lethal efficiency. Damon continued his walk, his pace unchanged. He stepped onto the loading dock. Leland scrambled back, reaching for a pistol tucked in his waistband. But he was too slow. Damon kicked the weapon away, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the empty warehouse. Leland screamed and clutched his hand. You broke my hand, Leland wailed, falling against a crate. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Damon said, standing over him. You're a man who bullies old women and kidnaps children. Trent, who had been hiding behind a stack of pallets, tried to run for the back exit. Marcus stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. Trent shrieked and threw his hands up, collapsing into a sobbing heap. Damon didn't look at the sun. He grabbed Leland by the lapels of his suit and hauled him close. The police aren't coming, Damon whispered, because I bought the bank that holds your mortgage. I bought the firm that handles your legal defense. And 10 minutes ago, I sent the evidence of your bribery to the FBI. You aren't just broke, Leland. You're finished. Damon shoved him away. Leland slumped against the wall, defeated not by a bullet, but by the realization that he was a small fish in an ocean he didn't understand. Etta Mae ran up the ramp. She didn't care about the gunman on the floor. She ran straight to Malik. Grandma. Malik sobbed, burying his face in her shoulder. She held him tight, rocking him back and forth. Then she looked up at Damon. His knuckles were bruised. There was a smear of blood on his cuff that wasn't his. Damon looked away, ashamed to be seen like this, violent, dangerous, a monster. Etta Mae stood up. She walked over to him, took her own handkerchief from her purse, and gently wiped the blood from his hand. You saved him, she said softly. I'm a criminal, Etta, Damon said, his voice rough. You're a child of God, Damon St. James, she corrected him, holding his gaze. Just like the rest of us. Even the jagged rocks have a purpose. 6 months later, the sun shone brightly on the manicured lawn of Georgia Tech. The air was filled with the sound of cheers and the smell of freshly cut grass. Malik Robinson, the dean announced over the loudspeaker. Etta Mae stood up in the front row, clapping so hard her palms stung. She wore a new hat, a bright yellow sun hat with a silk ribbon. Malik walked across the stage, his gown flowing, holding his diploma like it was a golden ticket. He scanned the crowd, found his grandmother, and grinned. Then he looked a few rows back. Damon sat there, wearing dark sunglasses and a suit that didn't shout money but whispered power. He gave Malik a single, sharp nod. It was the only validation the boy needed. The Van Der Hoven real estate empire had crumbled overnight. Trent and Leland were currently awaiting trial for racketeering and kidnapping. The gas station where Etta Mae had cried was now under new management, to community co-op funded by an anonymous donor. As the ceremony ended, Etta Mae found Damon by his car. "You didn't have to come," she said, though her eyes said she was glad he did. "I had to make sure the investment was sound," Damon joked, a rare, genuine smile touching his eyes. "He's going to build great things, Etta." "He is," she agreed. She patted Damon's arm. "And you? Are you still building your walls?" "Maybe a few windows this time," Damon said. He opened the door for her. "Come on, Sunday dinner. I believe you promised me sweet potato pie." "I did," Etta Mae laughed, getting into the car. "But you're peeling the potatoes." As the black SUV pulled away, blending into the traffic of the city, the lesson remained clear. Power isn't about the noise you make or the fear you instill. True power is the ability to protect the fragile things until they are strong enough to stand on their own. And that is the story of how a grandmother's dignity brought an empire to its knees. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of inspiration. We want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were at that gas station? Let us know in the comments below. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that justice always finds a way.